Well, as Glenn mentioned, we are going to be discussing supply chain and supply chain's role in all of this on sustainability. And the perfect person to talk to us about that is Chris Shanahan, who's VP Global Sustainability Supply Chain at Thermo Fisher Scientific. Let's say hello to Chris first. Welcome, Chris. That's as nice as it gets.
Yeah.
All right, so tell us about yourself. Share a little bit about your background and why the transition into sustainability. And tell us more about the company as well.
Sure. For those who don't know, Thermo Fisher Scientific, it's based out of Boston, US. It's a biotech life science company, contract manufacturing, services, product, and then distributors. 130,000 people globally. We've got over 800 locations, over 200 manufacturing sites, 27 divisions, 8 segments, over 1 million products in our portfolio. And we'll come to data. We got 120 plus ERP systems of every sort that you can imagine. And we'll come back to that. Me personally, so I'm in sustainability 15 months now at this stage.
An old hand.
I'm really real old hand. Dangerous. My background is supply chain procurement. So I was Chief Procurement Officer for Thermo Fisher. And prior to that, I was Chief Procurement Officer for a company called Becton Dickinson. I worked across healthcare, med device in my lifetime, over 35 years experience. I transitioned into sustainability, and why did I do that? I think as we think about our supply chains and supply networks for tomorrow, we need to address the factor of how do we actually do this. It's really around how do you execute, how do you make it happen, versus sort of making these aspirational goals that everybody does make. So it's really around taking some of the experiences I have and say, well, how do we make this happen within the network that we live in?
So how do you make it happen? That's the obvious question. How do you integrate sustainability into your global supply chain?
Yeah, so if you think about sustainability and operating models, so our operating model from what we've evolved to over the last 15 months, so we do have the traditional CSR team. So we have a team that looks at CSR, which is social investing and investor relations. So and they do our CSR report, etc. So we have that as a group. If you think about the compliance factors, we have a legal team. So within the legal team, we have a team that's really looking at compliance. Then we have the traditional EH&S. So we have a corporate EH&S leader. So then you have me, right? So in my space and what we've evolved to, so we got, if you think about environment, so scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, water, waste, biodiversity, so those aspects of what goes on from across the supply chain that sits with us. Social, upstream human rights activity, any regulation. So give me any 3-letter and 4-letter acronym that sits with us. And it sits with us in the sense of there's the legislation, there's the interpretation, there's what does it mean for you as a company, and then what do we have to do to comply? And we have a program management structure to manage that across the company. And then the last area is responsible procurement or responsible sourcing. So when you think about scope 3 as it relates to the 15 factors, so we got 3 that matter to us, which is the supplier, carrier, and our products. So we have a design for sustainability team that's really looking at product. So we look at legacy product, and then R&D will look at new products. So we've sort of created a different structure. We do think about it from a cradle to grave point of view, and then you can have gate to gate and all those lovely things that go in there. So it's evolving, we're learning. One of the actual sponsors up here helped us think that through, to be fair to them, so I'd acknowledge that.
We should name that sponsor, I guess.
Carney.
Okay, excellent. So let's talk about some specific examples then. So could you share some examples and some insights of successful sustainability initiatives that you've introduced or implemented when it comes to your supply chain?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. And look, the practicalities of commitment, so net zero by 2050, we've got those commitments, science-based, and we got a 2030 goal of 50%, and a sort of scope 2 VPPA of 80% by 2030. So it's really around how do you take a commitment to make it real. So 2018 as a company, we made that commitment. On the sort of getting to 30% by 2030, 2020 we realized we don't know how to get there. So in 2020, this is how I started getting introduced. We put together what we call a STRAP, a strategic plan. And part of that plan was thinking through 2030, 2050. And through that process, we had a cross-functional, cross-business team, came up with our plan, got approval from our CEO. And what we've done is converted that to sort of say we've made our commitment. We have been SBTi certified. But in there, it's really around, okay, you got scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. So scope 1 and 2, it can be seen as hard, but it's the easy thing to do, right? 5% of our emissions sit in scope 1, scope 2. Scope 1 for us is 50 manufacturing sites make up 80% of our emissions. So in the last 15 months, we have completed a pretty detailed analysis of all our sites. We know where end of life is on the equipment. We've got our plan through to say when those sites will transition out and into a zero play. We've got the capital plan identified for the sites and the operating expenses. And through that process, then we have a quarterly review of performance against each of the sites that are impacted here. So we're into the actual nuts and bolts of monitoring and measuring and actually going after making the change on the sort of scope 1, okay? Because scope 1 is usually the hardest part of making the change. Scope 2 is easier, VPPAs. So we have a number of VPPAs in place. We've got a number that are coming up in 25, 26, and we hope to be out of credits completely in 25. So we're building our plan that way. So we've put in the operating mechanisms around that. So if I come back to the operating model, one area I forgot to mention is the customer. So the customer is really a big part of the team as well. So we have a team that faces off with our customers, and they are looking for clearly improvements on their value chain. So through the sort of relationship we are building with our customers, we're really looking at how do we actually decarbonize the actual supply chain, and that comes back to product. Okay, so then you get into a product flow, and you start looking at gate to gate on your product and say, what do you have to do to hit product, which gets into material sourcing. So then my procurement hat comes back. Okay, so everything for me comes back to the supply chain, supply base, changing the way we do things within the sort of the network.
I want to pull you up on something you said at the start of that answer, which was you set a target, I think, in 2018, and in 2020 you realised you didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
What did you do in that 2 years?
Nothing. Let's be honest about it, okay? We reported out. We gathered data, we reported out, but there was no plan. And I think this is the issue when people, when we all make targets and we sort of set for targets, not having the plan and know of how to get there and what the cost is for getting there, doesn't work, right?
Do you think a lot of companies find themselves in exactly that same situation? They have good intentions and then realise we don't know what we're doing.
I think it's good intentions. When you peel back the onion, you look at the cost, and then you sort of say, oh, how do we back away?
Put the onion back together again.
Let's be, that's the transparency of what goes on.
Yeah.
And I think the way we think about it, and as customers ours would say the same, you have to get started. Okay, you don't focus on ROI. There are things you can do to get a good ROI. There are things that you can do that the ROI doesn't look good, but there are things you must do. But it's really picking the time and place to get that done. So you have to be realistic about what goes on.
So apart from that, apart from the cost and not having a clear, roadmap or plan in place, what other challenges do companies face adopting sustainable practices through their supply chains?
So where can you start? It starts with us, so it's people. So educating there's a pretty big educational element that we must all do. So we spend a lot of time of educating our sales teams, educating the actual, our colleagues, the procurement teams, and also educating our customers. Okay, and then educating our suppliers. So we spent a lot of time doing that. We got our playbooks. So we got you can go onto our website. You'll see a playbook for Scope 3 for suppliers, but everybody has access to it. We have our playbooks. Like if you think about Schneider earlier on, we have a playbook for our construction, whether it's a new build or existing build. We work with Schneider on that, so we have a construction playbook. But it's all about educating. The other area that, especially for us, it's more of our commercial teams, educating them about what is, sustainability, what is a commitment to net zero. And there is cost. So you have to sort of make sure part of our role is to make sure we don't get terms in our contracts that commits us to something that we can't do. So there's an element of that you need to think through when you sort of look at that end to end.
It's a really good point. And one of the sessions earlier emphasised the importance of collaboration.
Yes.
What role does that play in creating sustainable supply chains?
For me, it's number one, because you can't do this on your own. No company can. So you think about your true end-to-end, you have to be willing to adapt your supply chain. You have to make choices on your product. You have to be willing to share information, which for me is harder for people because that can be competitive advantage. Mm-hmm. But if you can sort of get to a stage where there's better transparency of data, there's lots of tech firms out there now creating new ventures. For us it's great, but at the same time we sort of say we don't want many, we just want a small number. Okay, so everybody gets, we get surveyed by our customers. We've sort of said in surveys, we'll do 3. Okay, we can't do 33. You have to simplify it. We have to make sure you simplify that whole process. So it's really, you can't do that on your own. You have to, calibrate through, or collaborate.
Yeah.
The other area around this is also, if you think about any product we have, it's also around the sourcing aspects of that in terms of, I'll use plastics. So plastics, carbon, lots of other things in there as well, PFAS. So when you think about plastics, you're also looking at what are the alternative solutions to plastics, okay? There is some technologies out there. Then you get into capacity, availability, and what's the scaling of that. So these are all things that we have to work through. But this working together piece is harder than it feels. We all participate in different bodies. We all work together. There's a sustainable procurement pledge for those who aren't aware of it. That it's a procurement group that get together and we talk about these topics, even as a sustainability person these days. But we do try to get together. We have customers, competitors in the room trying to figure out how do we actually get to some kind of standards going forward.
So just dwelling on that technology aspect that we're just talking about, is there too much technology? Is there there's a few questions here. I'm going to unpack this. Is there too much technology? Is there an over-reliance or over-expectation of what technology can help us achieve? And what's the best technology that you use for your sustainability?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. So, look, I'm a traditionalist. The first thing here is you need to get your data and processes first before you put that technology in. We all jump to the shiny new toy, which we've done, and you find that it doesn't really work. So I really would encourage people to think through their data and process before you jump to technology. Once you get into the technology, there is depending on where you're playing, right? So when you think about Scope 3, and there's a few upstairs, there's a lot of people playing in this space right now. I don't think there's any one leader out there. And it's really around getting something that works for you and also works for your supplier. Okay, so if I sort of correlate into human rights, there's also carbon there. We do use one of the pretty large company, it was mentioned earlier on today by Henkel. I think many of us might do that. They are probably the leaders in that space, but there are other companies out there, and depending on your supply base, supply chain, there are suppliers in your network that won't actually sign up for that particular platform, but they'll sign up for a different platform. So you really need to think through the users of that technology if it's external facing, and can they support it? Okay, and I'm not giving you an answer on the technology piece. What I will say is we use another sponsor up here for all our Scope 1 water and waste consolidation, and they've done a good job, to be fair to them as well.
Okay, all right, I know who that is then. Excuse me. All right, so you're playing a few cards close to your chest, rightly so. Are there some strategies or best practices that you think other companies can use, learn from your experiences when it comes to supply chain sustainability?
Yeah, the word challenge was used earlier on in a couple of questions. I would take everything here as an opportunity. Mm-hmm. Okay, so when you think about trying to drive a change in an organization, and what's the burning platform? Typically, burning platforms are, okay, we get a margin erosion, okay, we need to do something on cost, okay, we have a crisis, something goes on around the world geopolitically and it impacts our supply chains. Okay, this is a crisis. This is a burning platform. And I do think that you can use this in your company to actually create a change. And we have done that within Thermo Fisher, and we've been pretty successful with that. Part of it's driven by customer. But you do need, I think you have to think through your business case and your value proposition of why you should do this. Customer is a key part of that for me. Investors, for those who are public traded companies, some do, some there's a view, not as much today, but there is a view around that. I think the other big thing that's going on right now is regulation. Okay, so as I said, that all the 4-letter acronyms and 3-letter acronyms are out there. We all know what they are, I think. That is going to change the way we think and report as we go forward. Cost accounting, everybody knows pretty well. Carbon accounting is the future. And what is that carbon, what does carbon accounting look like? I think we're all learning. The Big Four, to be fair, don't really know either. I think they're going to learn as we go as well. So there's lots of things that are going to sort of enforce change in how we think about things. The way I look at that is not challenges, it's really these are opportunities. It opens a door to go in and do something different. So that's what I would encourage people to think through, is how do I take it to create the opportunity?
Absolutely, and it's a more positive way of looking at it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because every challenge also is an opportunity, somewhere.
It is.
Yeah.
It's the learning.
One final point then, you mentioned the future there, so gaze into your crystal ball. What do you see as the future of supply chain sustainability? Immediate future, like next 2-3 years.
I think...
Keep it positive, come on.
But I think it's the positive thing here for me is 18 months ago, we wouldn't have been talking about this the way we are. So there's been a massive shift of talking and thinking. And it's not so much the geopolitical CEO level shift, because I think that's sort of died down a wee bit. I think it's everybody in the room here. And if you think about peers that I came from, where I came out of from a professional point of view, everybody's talking about it and everybody's trying to think through how to solve it. And that's the togetherness piece, right? But we have to do it in an efficient way. So the next 2 to 3 years, I think we have to continue to build that sort of momentum of trying to standardize to a standardized approach and share information. That's what, for me, we need to actually go and try and do. I think there's some requirements coming out, and this is where I look to maybe customers of ours in the room, is as you think about requirements, that you need to set requirements that are realistic okay, that people can achieve in that sort of 1 to 3 year horizon. There's some requirements we see coming out, and they want product carbon footprinting at a SKU level. Okay, going back to the geo, I don't think that's possible today, and it's not challenging. It's an opportunity, but it's just be realistic about what we can do. But we're all going in the right direction, when I reflect back over the last 18 months, that's for sure.
I like that positive way to end it. Fantastic to speak to you. Thank you so much. Chris Shanahan, everyone. Thank you, Chris. Thank you.